The story of Ashoka the Great begins with a whisper of terror that echoed across ancient India. Villagers spoke his name with fear. Soldiers marched beneath his banner as if following a rising storm. But few knew that the same man would one day renounce violence and reshape an entire empire. Some described him as brilliant, others said he was ruthless, almost unstoppable. No one expected that a single moment in his life would crack open his armor and expose a heart he never knew he had. And that moment was far closer than anyone imagined. Picture the vast Mauryan Empire at dawn. Mist rises over the Ganges plains like a silver veil. The ground trembles under war elephants, their tusks painted with symbols of dominance. At their center rides Ashoka, a prince hungry for power and a warrior determined to prove he deserves the throne. But here's the twist. Everything he believed about strength was about to collapse. For years, legends called him Ashoka the Fierce. They claimed he fought with a fire that scorched anyone who stood in his path. Even his own family felt the heat of his ambition. But that isn't the shocking part. What matters is why he became this way, and what would eventually break him. Today we dive into the mystery behind his transformation. How did a feared conqueror become one of history's greatest peacekeepers? What tragedy turned a warrior into a guardian of compassion and law? The answers lie buried in blood, betrayal, and one devastating battle that changed the face of India forever. Stay with me, because the truth behind Ashoka's awakening is far more gripping than any legend, and it starts long before the bloodshed at Kalinga. Long before Ashoka's transformation stunned the ancient world, the Mauryan Empire was already a giant, a vast, pulsing realm stretching from the snow-lit Himalayas to the lush forests near the southern seas. Its cities thrived with merchants, philosophers, and soldiers moving through crowded bazaars filled with incense, silk, and whispers of political intrigue. But beneath this prosperity, tension brewed. The empire was strong, yet fragile, powerful, yet divided by ambition. At the heart of this massive realm stood Pataliputra, a city unlike any other in the ancient world. Wooden palisades shielded its bustling streets, while the royal court glimmered with gold, scrolls, and the scent of sandalwood. Advisors debated, generals argued, and spies slipped through corridors carrying secrets like shadowed blades. And towering above them all was Emperor Binjusara, a ruler determined to keep his empire intact, but a father whose sons were locked in a silent and dangerous rivalry. Ashoka was not the heir favored by the royal court. His older brothers held positions of prestige, wrapped in luxury and political support. Ashoka, however, was the outsider prince, sent to govern distant and difficult provinces. But this exile shaped him. It gave him a harsh education in leadership, survival, and war. People whispered that he was too strict, too intense, maybe even too willing to spill blood. But no one could deny that he got results. In the northern territories, he crushed rebellions with swift brutality. In Taxila, a region boiling with unrest, he restored order when others had failed. His methods alarmed some, yet impressed many. If the empire is ever in danger, one minister murmured, Ashoka will be the one we call. But that recognition came with a chilling warning. Strength earns respect, but it also awakens fear, and fear can fracture a royal family. This tension only grew as Binjusara's health faded. Courtiers watched Ashoka's every move, wondering if he was a threat to the succession. The palace halls echoed with rumors. He's too ambitious, some insisted. He's too ruthless, others whispered. But a few saw something deeper in him, a restless mind searching for purpose, and a heart hardened by isolation rather than cruelty. No one, not even Ashoka, knew which path he would follow. Meanwhile, the world outside the palace shifted. Trade routes expanded, tribes migrated, and regional kingdoms tested the borders of Mauryan power. Among these rising forces stood Kalinga, a proud, independent kingdom on the eastern coast. Rich in culture and maritime trade, Kalinga refused to bow to Mauryan dominance. Their defiance simmered like a spark waiting to become wildfire. What no one understood yet was how deeply this spark would ignite Ashoka's destiny. The Mauryan Empire was moving toward a collision, one born from pride, ambition, and the belief that victory was the only language of power. But this collision would do more than reshape borders. It would reshape the man destined to rule them. And so the stage was set, a vast empire at its peak, a fractured royal household, and a lonely prince whose rise would come at a cost no one dared imagine. But the real storm was still gathering, and its impact would echo across centuries. When Ashoka finally stepped toward his fate, he did so with confidence. What he didn't know was that the greatest battle of his life would not be fought against an enemy on the field, but against the turmoil inside his own soul. Ashoka's rise toward the throne did not begin with celebration or acceptance. It began with suspicion and fear. When Emperor Bindusara grew weak, the palace atmosphere thickened like a storm cloud ready to burst. Ministers chose sides, brothers plotted in the shadows, and Ashoka, hardened by distant campaigns, walked into Pataliputra knowing that every smile hid a blade. Whispers followed him everywhere. "He conquers too easily," one courtier muttered. "He enjoys war too much," another warned. But despite the politics swirling around him, Ashoka stayed focused. He knew the empire needed stability, not infighting. Still, the rivalry within the Mauryan family grew sharper by the day. And in a kingdom where power meant survival, hesitation was dangerous. Very dangerous. When Bindusara died, the palace erupted. Competing factions rallied behind different princes. Alliances snapped. Guards switched loyalties overnight. In the chaos, Ashoka seized control with ruthless efficiency. Some say the struggle left several rivals dead. Others claim he acted only to prevent civil war. The truth lies somewhere between those shadows. But what mattered was the result. Ashoka emerged victorious. He was crowned Emperor Ashoka Maurya, ruler of one of the greatest empires the world had ever seen. Yet, even in that moment of triumph, he felt the weight of expectation pressing against his shoulders. The ministers watched him carefully. The people waited to see what kind of ruler he would become. Would he be a protector or a tyrant? No one knew. And Ashoka himself wondered which path he was destined to walk. But the empire had little time to settle. On the eastern frontier, the kingdom of Kalinga grew more defiant. Their merchants refused Mauryan taxes. Their leaders ignored imperial envoys. Their warriors stood proudly on the coastline, ready to fight rather than submit. To Ashoka, this defiance felt like an insult, a challenge to his authority, a test of his strength. And he was not a man who walked away from challenges. Advisors urged caution. Diplomats begged for negotiation. But Ashoka, still fueled by the fire of ambition and haunted by insecurity, saw only one solution. "If Kalinga will not bow," he declared, "then Kalinga will break." His generals nodded. His war elephants were prepared. And the drumbeats of conflict rolled across the empire like distant thunder. The march toward Kalinga was slow and heavy, filled with the metallic clatter of armor and the growling rumble of elephants moving through thick forests. Ashoka rode at the front, face set like stone, eyes fixed on the horizon. His soldiers admired his resolve, yet feared what it meant. Because this war was not just another campaign, it was personal, it was symbolic. It was the moment when Ashoka decided to prove to the world and to himself that he was undefeatable. As Mauryan forces approached the borders of Kalinga, tension crackled in the air. The Kalingan warriors, fierce and proud, lined the hills and riverbanks with shields raised and flags snapping in the wind. They were ready to fight to the last breath. They knew what defeat meant. They knew Ashoka's reputation. And they refused to surrender. No one expected what would come next. And even Ashoka wasn't prepared for the price of the victory he saw. The drums of war thundered. Spears rattled. War elephants stamped the ground, impatient for battle. And on the plains near the Daya River, two worlds collided with a force that would echo through centuries. The Battle of Kalinga began, brutal, relentless, and destined to leave scars deeper than any blade. But what happened after the battle, that was the true turning point, and Ashoka's life would never be the same again. The Battle of Kalinga raged like a living nightmare. The earth shook beneath charging elephants. Arrows darkened the sky. The cries of soldiers echoed over the Daya River until the water itself seemed to tremble. For hours, the two sides clashed with unbroken fury. And Ashoka, watching from the front lines, believed he was moments away from the ultimate victory he had long desired. But he didn't yet see the storm waiting on the other side of triumph. When the fighting finally stopped, the battlefield fell into a haunting silence. Smoke curled upward from broken chariots. Shields lay shattered in the dirt. The final count of the dead stretched far beyond any battle Ashoka had ever witnessed. Entire families had fought, entire families had fallen. And as the dust settled, the cost of conquest revealed itself in a way Ashoka never expected. He rode through the battlefield expecting pride, but felt something different. His horse stepped around bodies that seemed too young to be soldiers. Mothers who had pleaded for peace lay beside sons who had fought without choice. The ground was soaked not in glory, but grief. Ashoka dismounted, overwhelmed by the weight of the destruction he had caused. And in that moment, a crack appeared in the armor he had worn his entire life. Some accounts say he saw a single child searching the bodies for her father. Others say he witnessed a wounded soldier whisper his final prayer. Whatever the truth, something inside him broke. A cold realization swept through him. This victory would never feel like triumph. It felt like loss, a loss so deep it carved into his soul. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The real transformation had only begun. Back in Pataliputra, Ashoka struggled to sleep. The sounds of battle followed him like ghosts. He asked himself questions that no emperor dared speak aloud. What have I done? What does victory mean if it destroys the very people I rule? He searched for answers in the palace halls, but found only echoes of war, reminders of the ruler he had been, and the man he no longer wanted to be. One night, as the city slept under moonlight, Ashoka wandered the gardens of the palace alone. There, he encountered a quiet Buddhist monk. The monk bowed, unafraid of the emperor's presence. Ashoka, shaken and exhausted, asked the question that had tormented him since Kalinga. Is there a path that does not end in suffering? The monk's reply was simple, but it struck Ashoka like lightning. Yes, but the journey begins within yourself. Those words opened a door Ashoka had never considered, a path not of conquest, but of reflection. Not of power, but of compassion. The mystery of what a new kind of emperor could be began to unfold in his mind. What would happen if he ruled not through fear, but through wisdom? What if strength came from peace rather than bloodshed? These questions haunted him and guided him. Slowly, Ashoka withdrew from the brutal strategies of his past. He studied Buddhist teachings, listened to monks, and sought ways to ease the suffering he had caused. But even as he changed, one troubling thought lingered like a shadow. Would the empire accept a transformed emperor? Would his generals, ministers, and rivals see compassion as weakness, or would they use it against him? The real test was not surviving the war, it was rebuilding himself. Rebuilding an empire, and proving that peace could hold an empire together just as power once did. But Ashoka had no idea how difficult and how revolutionary that path would become. Ashoka's transformation did not arrive as a sudden revelation carved in stone. It unfolded slowly, like dawn breaking over a scarred landscape. The emperor, who once thundered into battle, now sat in quiet chambers, listening to philosophers, monks, and ordinary citizens. He sought stories of suffering, injustice, and hardship, and each one fueled a growing determination to repair what he had once destroyed. But as he embraced change, a new challenge emerged. Could a warrior king truly rebuild an empire through peace? His first steps were small but symbolic. He banned unnecessary slaughter. He ordered medical treatment for humans and animals alike. He sent trusted envoys across the empire with one mission: to understand the needs of the people. Roads were repaired. Wells were dug. Shade trees were planted along travel routes. Ashoka wanted every corner of his realm to feel the shift within him. But he soon realized that compassion alone was not enough. He needed structure. He needed a philosophy that would outlast him. This led him deeper into the teachings of the Buddha. The principles of nonviolence, compassion, and moral duty resonated with a part of him he had long ignored. He began carving these ideas into stone pillars and rock faces across the empire. These inscriptions, the famous edicts of Ashoka, were more than royal commands. They were confessions, promises, and guidance all at once. And each one carried a message he hoped would reshape the future. Conquest by Dharma is superior to conquest by sword. But not everyone embraced his transformation. Generals feared the army would weaken. Some ministers whispered that the empire might crumble without aggressive expansion. Rivals watched, waiting for a sign that Ashoka's compassion made him vulnerable. Yet he remained steady. He believed that moral strength could be just as powerful as military force, perhaps even more. His conviction surprised many. No one expected this. They murmured. A king who once ruled through fear now ruled through empathy. The empire braced itself for either rebirth or collapse. Surprisingly, something remarkable happened. Instead of weakening, the Mauryan Empire grew culturally richer. Trade expanded under peaceful policies. Neighboring kingdoms viewed Ashoka with a mix of admiration and curiosity. They saw a ruler who had conquered himself, and that stirred respect in a way no battlefield ever could. Diplomats noted a calmer tone in regional politics. Scholars traveled freely. Monasteries rose across the land, offering not only spiritual refuge but schools, libraries, and centers of learning. Even beyond India's borders, Ashoka's influence spread like a ripple across water. He sent emissaries to Sri Lanka, to the Hellenistic kingdoms, and along trade routes stretching toward Central Asia. They carried not threats but teachings, stories, and messages of peace. For many foreign rulers, this approach was bewildering yet refreshing. How could a man who once burned with ambition now speak of compassion so gently? What had changed his heart so deeply? The answer was simple. He had faced the consequences of his own power, and he refused to repeat them. Still, the question lingers, did Ashoka's empire remain stable because of his transformation or in spite of it? Historians debate this endlessly. Some argue that peace strengthened internal unity. Others believe his successors lacked his vision, causing decline after his death. But perhaps the real lesson lies elsewhere. Ashoka proved that even the most feared ruler can choose a different path, a path built on empathy, justice, and responsibility. And that choice, rare as it is, can leave an imprint far more enduring than conquest. The world often remembers kings for the lands they seized or the armies they commanded. But Ashoka is remembered for something far more difficult, the battle he fought within himself, and the empire of compassion he tried to build afterward. And this shift did more than change his own life. It changed the moral landscape of an entire civilization. Ashoka's journey reminds us that history is not shaped only by battles or victories. Sometimes it is shaped by the rare moment when a powerful man confronts his own reflection and chooses to change. The emperor who once rode at the front of thundering armies ended his days walking softly among monks, scholars, and ordinary people. And though the scars of Kalinga never left him, he turned that pain into a promise that echoed far beyond his lifetime. Even today, those stone pillars he raised still stand across India and beyond, weathered by wind, sun, and centuries, yet still carrying his voice. They whisper a simple message: compassion is not weakness. Mercy is not surrender. And the greatest victory is the one won over fear, anger, and the hunger for domination. It's a message that feels just as urgent now as it did 2,000 years ago. But here's the thought that lingers long after Ashoka's story ends. If a ruler once feared for his brutality could transform an empire through kindness, what might each of us change by choosing understanding over conflict? How different would our world look if we paused before the moment of anger and chose the path Ashoka finally embraced? The answer is uncertain, but the possibility is powerful. Ashoka's life teaches one final lesson. Redemption is not a gift granted by others. It's a decision we make one moment at a time, no matter how dark our past may be. And sometimes, the people who seem least likely to change end up changing the world the most. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe to History Hub for more cinematic stories, and step with us into the next legend waiting to be told.